Hello, hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Rabid Dog House. Here in the house, we like to focus on horror gems that audiences may have overlooked or forgotten all about. I'm your host, Justin Steele. Tonight, we are going to be taking a look at 2000 Psycho Beach Party, directed by Robert Lee King. Based on the stage play by Charles Busch, Psycho Beach Party is a slasher spoof of 60s beach movies. A killer is knocking off beach bums with various abnormalities, and it's up to a wannabe surfer chick with split personalities to discover the killer's identity, even if it might be her. Starring Lauren Ambrose, Amy Adams, Nicholas Brendan, and Matt Kiesler. Joining me tonight is our very special guest star, Zena Dixon. We have again in the house Zena Dixon. Thanks for joining us again tonight, Zena.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody.
It's always a pleasure. And tonight we're going to be talking about 2000 Psycho Beach Party, a nice, fun, campy horror comedy that really rides the line of having some good, gory, scary moments that are over the top, but good characters, fun, very reminiscent, satirical parody of like beach movies from the 60s, the days of Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon, which for me, Zena, that's how, a part of me coming into it. I had just graduated high school. This movie was on HBO. We had the kind of house that sometimes we had premium cable, sometimes we didn't. It was one of those times where we did, and I was flipping through and I saw this man in drag on the beach interrogating these kids, and I'm like, what is this movie? What's going on? And I'm like, oh, it's Psycho Beach Party. What is this? So I got to check it out, and I'm 100% glad I did. It is definitely a movie I watch once a year. And my mother growing up was a big, big fan of those beach movies. I mean, everything was Annette and Frankie, everything. Cookie, cookie, lend me your comb. That was my mom. But Zena, how did you come into Psycho Beach Party?
Kind of similar to you. I actually first checked it out on HBO, and I think I was probably like 12 or 13 years old. And I always just had like a habit of always just staying up late watching movies. And I was completely mesmerized by the opening with the girl who's dancing. Like, what's happening? It was just like, whoa!
Yes.
I really just wanted to be here, to be honest. And then once I saw that it took place on the beach, and I kind of went through this phase. Like, I was a weird kid. Like, I went through this phase where I was really into the 50s, 60s. Like, where I used to always watch like I Dream of Jeannie as an example. And so
Yeah.
seeing this kind of like reminded me of it. And especially when I found out that it was taking place on the beach, because it actually reminded me, it's completely different, but it reminded me of this movie from the 60s called The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. So it's kind of like a horror comedy. It's more comedy, think Scooby-Doo, but with,
For sure.
real people. So, but the point is, I just remember staying up really late and just watching the movie and just falling in love with Chicklet and all the characters, like the pacing. I thought it was hilarious. I mean, I did try
Yeah.
to show other people. They really didn't think it was funny, but they don't have.
I always have a hit or miss reaction. My mom loved it. I showed it to her many years later because it took me forever to find a DVD copy of it. I always kind of looked, couldn't find it anywhere. I finally think I just ordered it. And with you have the rare projection surfing moments that are
Right.
so, a staple of all those movies, but they really, updated to make it work for this film. And you're right, though, it's hit or miss, but for people that like, I think a lot of my friends, I'll be like, okay, we're going to watch this horror movie, but it's funny. And then if they're in the mood for that kind of humor, love it. Hands
Right.
down, love it. But if they're expecting something, like Halloween or, where it's going to have that terror element, no, I wouldn't say it has that, but it has a lot of fun.
Right. I agree. So much fun.
Now, he doesn't star as the role of Chicklet, but Charles Busch, who is a drag performer, plays the detective in this movie, Detective Monica, and he started this off Broadway. He was definitely a staple of off Broadway during the 80s, and he kind of started getting more segued into film, and he thought this would be a great way. I mean, the film was filmed in only 21 days, and I think they did an excellent job for such like a limited amount of filming time. But his idea was he was such an effeminate actor that he couldn't find a lot of roles for himself, so he started just creating roles, and he kind of, was a hot topic on the scene during the 80s. And it really is an homage to, like, it started off, Gidget Goes Psycho was, I think, the original working title of all those Gidget movies. And he loved playing those sort of Joan Crawford, Susan Hayward, Lana Turner, all those like big over the top actresses, Betty Davis. And later on, he ended up doing a movie called Die, Mommy Die, which really encapsulated that. But I think this is a genius idea. We do have this tendency to enjoy parodies or satires on things that are beloved. And it really does take those sort of films, either the Gidget movie or the Beach Blanket Bingo movies, and sort of like combine it into this murder mystery. But I guess at first it really wasn't supposed to be a murder mystery. And I'm glad that they really did incorporate that element, because I think it's clever. I think it takes a lot of tropes from those sort of horror movies, like The Haunted House, is the house haunted, serial killer. I think the original tagline for the movie was, the 60s beach movies with, a 70s slasher feel and 50s psychodramas all together in one. And Charles Busch, he really did encapsulate that idea. He said he felt by the time Psycho Beach Party was made that he no longer could play the ingenue of 18, being that he was in his 40s at this time. But he was like, I can play a sophisticated 25. So that's why he took on the role of Monica. And he comes to life. And Lauren Ambrose, the cast in general, I think is terrific. I don't know if you were ever a fan of 6 Feet Under.
No. I've never had a chance to get into it.
Definitely one of my favorite dramas of all time. But Lauren Ambrose, she was just getting started with that, and she's an opera singer stuff, and you hear that in the movie. So it's definitely that time where we were like looking for a new way of looking at things. And I think that when we're about to turn a corner in horror, often we start to parody things before, though, right before. That's, Scary Movie came out at that time. We started parodying Scream. And I think that this is one of those movies. But what do you think about the performances in Psycho Beach Party?
I was very surprised by it, even going back and rewatching it, because I watched it. It's been a little bit since I watched it. I probably watched it maybe 2-3 years ago, but I watched it earlier this week. And someone who really stood out, honestly, Laura Ambrose, correct?
Lauren Ambrose, yep. Mm-hmm.
She really stood out for me because you can kind of like see her range. It was funny, with the split personality, but they were literally different people. So just even seeing like her performance, in that she even, like, I know you're in the movie, obviously, or she's in the movie, where it's like you can't really see, as the viewer, you're not seeing behind the scenes. But right. What I find funny is that there's commitment. There's no, sometimes when you're watching a performance and it's like, oh, she kind of she's smiling like she thinks it's funny. Like, she was fully committed to it. And also on the movie, her mother, Mrs. Forrester,
Oh yeah.
I don't remember her real name, but the woman who's also in Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Correct. Yeah.
From the 90s. She was hilarious. She was hilarious. And like
the scene where they're trying to take her away at the end, and you kind of find out that she's like a bit of a nymphomaniac, and so the way she tries to save herself is wrapping her legs, but in this sensual way, around this rock and stuff. And her interactions with Lars, which she's like she's like just screwing the light bulb, very funny. Very funny, because it does take, these could get really silly. Like, you're right, they could be almost laughing or making fun of it, but they all take this sincere approach that then it makes it enjoyable. Well, they said, the big thing about finding the role of Chicklet going on with Lauren Ambrose is that they auditioned like 200 or 300 girls, and everybody could do the role of Chicklet, but it was doing the role of Anne Bowman as well as the role of Tylene, the checkout cash out girl, that's where they had a problem. They were like, about 200 people could do Chicklet, and about, of those 200 people, 40 could do Anne Bowman, but only Lauren Ambrose really captured all three of these characters, which are all great. I mean, you 100% believe her that like she's in this role, and she makes it. I mean, the movie would be made or broken on her back. So even
with so I'm sorry, I'm still just going back to her mother, Mrs. Forrester.
Please, yeah.
Do you remember the part when Chicklet was like, "Mom, don't you want to, like, shouldn't you just throw that in the washer or whatever?" And she was like, "Oh no, it's pure." I'm sorry, people probably don't understand what I'm saying, but basically, she could have threw his underwear, in the washer, but she
Yeah.
wanted to hang
So
out that.
they have this foreign exchange student staying with them, which is also like a staple of these movies. And yeah, she's holding the jockstrap. He's like insisting on doing his own laundry, and she's like, no, I got it. And it has like it's a jockstrap, and she's like wiping it, and she's like, oh, those darn urine stains. But
Yeah, like
again, character Mrs. Forrest has this like nymphomaniac undercurrent where she's like handling a man's junk or what was in it, and so she gets so into it. But yeah, she's a delight in it. And I guess the actress said that she she always got sort of stereotyped into these, the mother girl next door or aunt next door roles. So to play somebody with like this edge was a delight for her, she said. So
well, that's good to hear. That's awesome.
yeah, no, she's definitely a great character. And it is what's great about her character, Chicklet, the guys, is that everybody is a suspect. You 100% believe at the end that any of them could be the killer because as the movie's going along, people are showing up dead. And every time Chicklet has just she has sort of like blanked out with her schizophrenic split personalities. And I always really liked Nicholas Brendan's character, how he like will jump in with these sort of pseudo psychological like psychotherapist analysis because he took 3 semesters at the college, and he'll be like, well, just off the top of my head, I think you might be suffering from manic depression, attitudes of a psycho splits personality, just kind of throwing it off, and which is great. I mean, it's a funny atmosphere, but yeah, as it's going along, Mrs. Forrest could just as well be the killer, and I like that about this movie that you don't know. And even when it does get revealed, it makes sense. It works perfectly. But it could be anybody. Bettina, she is great in it. The sort of sex
Yeah.
kitten. I really like that homage to like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. But she is the pizza waitress with 3 heads and this sort of silliness. But yeah, right off the beginning, you got the drive-in sequence because what this killer is doing is trying to attack people with certain abnormalities, whether it be, this one girl's a hair lip, another girl's in a wheelchair. And so, you kind of find out that the main character sort of has the biggest sort of issue of all. And as the movie plays along, but it also has fun. There's a love story thrown in there, but it's updated. It's an
Absolutely.
updated version. What they couldn't do, things they couldn't say back in the 50s or 60s, they can say now in the year 2000. Like the whole homoerotic sort of subplot with Provolone and Yo-Yo.
Right.
It's like these are characters back in those movies that were sort of in the peripheral, but like now we could be like, oh, these 2 guys over here wrestling all the time as we're squirting oil all over them. Maybe there's a little bit more to it.
Right.
Or
Right.
even with the language, especially with the language, the things they say, like Nicholas Brendan when he's talking to Chicklet. I'm blanking on the character's name, but the guy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he's kind of like talking about it, and it's all romantic, and then he gets very vulgar with her, and in a funny way. But you're definitely like, yeah, these. I think that was the thing when I showed my mom this movie, and she was like expecting, the sort of beach party blanket or whatever, beach blanket bingo, and when they started saying things like that, she was kind of like, wait, what? I mean, I watch anything with my mom, but she definitely had a funny reaction to it, not expecting that sort of thing.
You know, Going back to what you said, how, pretty much the killer could have been anybody, any of the characters. That is 100% true. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know about you, but I kind of had a hard time figuring it out when I first watched it, who it could be. Like, at first, obviously, it's all pointing to Chicklet, and you just kind of
yeah,
believe it. But then I actually thought that it was her friend, Bernadine, because, she's jealous, so why not?
yeah.
But then, when all the stuff just starts happening with her mom and how she's wrapping her legs around a rock, it's like, okay, maybe it might be her mom. So it's really cool. And I'm someone who really enjoy mysteries. So although it is a comedy and it has like the horror elements, it
Right.
also has like the mystery and it has the romance. So I do feel like this movie could be very satisfying to anyone, even right now. Like it's actually
I
perfect
think so. I think it holds up.
right now. It's so surprising. Not that I would want this, but it's so surprising, like that no one thought to ever remake it or reimagine it or whatever people call nowadays. But and I know
Sure,
people
for sure.
say that like, oh, with X movie it doesn't need a remake, but honestly, this one it really doesn't need one. I still feel like it holds up.
Yeah,
You know, so and then even going back to some of like the male characters and everything like that, it's just like they all kind of just gel together, you know? You can actually see them hanging out, you know? Um,
Yeah, like they were having fun on screen, and
right,
you can tell, like real life as well as for the movie's sake.
right. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so weird. As I was telling you before, like I will show some people the movie because it's like, hey, this is hilarious, you know? And parts that I'm
Right.
laughing at, like, you know, I was laughing at the part with The Rock with her mom. I was also laughing at the part when, you know, when they're surfing because it's clearly fake, but it's meant to be fun,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Even when
I
she
think it
becomes,
engages the audience in that way too. That we're so
right,
obvious this is a silly thing. So you can almost take it serious because, or seriously because it's so fake, so
absolutely,
obvious.
absolutely, and it's just again, it's just such a great movie. Like I just feel like more people need to give it a chance, just check it out. So
Well, I guess in the I guess in the original play, it's not there's not really a slasher element to it. I only mildly researched this, but I guess it's more like they play certain parts for jokes, and then at the end, everything comes out. But I really did like that they took a sort of slasher element with this and kind of did add that mystery, the sort of who done it, but it does also at the same time, I do like these off-Broadway plays. You're right, like they might remake it or they could, but like you said, it maybe because it's a period piece, it's done in 2000, but it takes place in the 60s. I think it can work that it still holds up today, that it wouldn't need a sort of reimagining. But what's great about it is that I do know there are still productions being made, and I love going to see horror theater. I don't know if you ever seen The Evil Dead the musical?
unfortunately not. I've heard great things about it.
If you get a chance, see it. You come into the theater, and like if you go to SeaWorld, you have the splash zone. Well, when you go into the theater for Evil Dead the musical, there's the blood zone. So you have, if you want to sit in the first 5 rows, you're gonna get fake blood on you. So you have to
Oh,
be
cool.
careful. But already starting off, it's kind of funny. But then they have these big musical numbers, like it's very campy, where like they're driving in this car and it's obviously fake and on stage, but belting out like going to a cabin in the woods. There's nothing like scary about this. And then, the one sister opens a door and she's like, I'm going to go out to the woods by myself. That's no problem. And then when everything starts to happen, like in the movie, the two guys end up alone and they have this duet called What the Fuck Was That? And it's this huge, beautiful, like these two male, solid, beautiful voices singing, What the fuck was that? And it's, so I enjoy those sort of comedy, horror, theater things. And this is one of them. So people can still get to see it, which I think is great. Um, but yeah, I think it holds up well. It showcases these different talents, like Lauren Ambrose with her operatic voice. Nicholas Brendan was still on Buffy the Vampire Slayer at the time, so I thought this was a fun way for him to get a leading role character because his shtick, if you will, on Buffy was always to be like sort of the second fiddle, the not hero guy. And Thomas Gibson was really funny, and he plays that sort of rhyming, the Kanaka, where he's sort of like, "Hey man, sit in this can," sort of rhyming all the time. And they all took it so seriously. And I guess Thomas Gibson at the time, he was doing like Eyes Wide Shut while filming Dharma and Greg while
Mhm.
doing this. So they all came together for this sort of passion project to make this work. And Charles Busch also later did a movie called Die, Mommy Die, which again was based on one of his theatrical plays, his stage plays. But Jason Priestley, at the time signed on right away. It was sort of like, yes, I've got to be a part of this because these films, as much because you and I, many, many others, we love horror. We love scary movies. We love sincerely scary movies. But I think that what makes movies like Scary Movie as a parody work so well are that when we see these sort of tropes and themes come about, it enhances the joy for us loving horror. And I feel like Psycho Beach Party is the type of movie that if you appreciate the comedic elements that happen with horror films, then you can really enjoy it and have just a fun little experience. It's the type of movie I'd watch in college with my friends or hanging out with a group of kids. It's silly, but at the same time, it's just as enjoyable by yourself trying to figure out the mystery. But in general, I do love horror comedies. Some of my favorite are Slither or campy as Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, the one with Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey. And I love the sort of John Waters movies. Not a lot of them are horror, but his early ones definitely had some horrific moments, like Desperate Living. And Jennifer's Body is definitely one of my favorite, like it's another one of those movies. Now, this one takes a more sincere approach. It's almost like a Heather's horror movie, but really, it walks that line very well of being like really scary, but yet also really funny, but like with a dark comedy sort of way. But what are some of your favorite horror comedies?
Well, first, great job with your list. That's an awesome list. I
Ah,
love the fact that you have
yeah.
Jennifer's Body because
Oh, yeah,
it's
yes.
just so wonderful. It's just amazing. I love it so much.
That
Especially
would be, I would say that's on my top 10 movies of the past 10 years. I think, like, as a movie in general, it's a good movie.
it
So,
is. It is. Oh, I do have a couple because, like you, I really do. I love horror comedies so much. But I think that the one that's number one, and it has been since honestly since I was like 12, Dead Alive. Dead Alive is everything. It's
yes.
just so
I've
much
only saw
fun.
once a long time ago, and I laughed. I laughed a lot. I remember. I just don't own it, so I think that's why I haven't gone back to it. But yes,
It,
tell
it's
us why you love Dead Alive.
Oh my God, it's wonderful. Like little side story how I first watched it. I told you like my mom, she's a huge horror fan, and she would always just buy a whole bunch of DVDs or at the time, yeah, it was on DVD at the time that we when we first watched it, and I was just so obsessed with it. Like the first time she saw me like that we watched it, she was like, "Hey, you might like this movie." We watched it, and it was just so wonderful. And then I remember whenever my friends would come over, we would watch it. Whenever her friends would come over, whenever anybody would come over, it's time for us to watch a movie. I would suggest Dead Alive. I remember we would watch it every single day during the summer. And I know that she
Nice.
hated doing that, but that's just shows she's also mom. But yeah, so Dead Alive is amazing. I also really love Idle Hands. I feel like
Oh, yeah, Idle Hands is a really good one. I feel like
it's
that's one that kind of like got looked down at the time, but I would hang out with my cousin watching it. I don't know, it really captured that time of the late 90s, but really funny too. Like the friends in it. I mean, he's funny in it too, Devin Sawa, but his friends in it too. I mean, they crack me up the entire time. Isn't Jessica Alba in it too, I
yeah.
think? Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. That's a really funny one.
It's such a great time, and it's like I love watching it like around Halloween. That's just one of the movies that I watch around it like every year. Another one I believe either came out the late '90s or the early 2000s. Club Dread. That's another one about. I think that you would really dig this one. Um,
Say it again. What was the name of it? Dread?
yeah, Club Dread.
Club Dread. I've
Um,
heard of it, never seen it. Okay.
I
You think I
think that
like it?
yeah, I think that you would really, really enjoy it.
Okay.
Also, of course, I have to say Fright Night because the
Oh,
night game Fright.
sure. Yeah, sure. Another one that's like best of all worlds, scary as well as funny in jokes. Yes, yes. I will always be on the bandwagon of Fright Night. Yes.
Well, I'm glad
But
that you feel the same. And
oh, I do. I think it's really good. Like I'm curious about Club Dread now. And yeah, these movies, I do think like if they don't find that right center, then yeah, then it gets silly or off track. But the ones I've seen that you mentioned, obviously the ones I mentioned, I think all have this ability to just bring joy. It's for the horror fan. It's not horror. It's not just about being the scares. I love the scares, but it's also there's I feel so silly and corny saying it, but it's just there's a joy that comes from it. And why not get some laughter out of it?
right,
Why not see these teens acting up or being funny, or even when the adults, like the mom again, being over the top, ridiculous. And I just think I love horror comedies.
have you ever seen Deathgasm?
I've never seen Deathgasm.
Oh, that is an awesome comedy.
When did how old is that one? Is that one an older one?
No, it recently came out, maybe 2015, and it's an Australian.
Okay.
So it's
Deathgasm. It
yes,
already sounds interesting.
it's I think
They
it's
get the right title. It's
right. It
like
is. It
Teeth.
has a
Like
really
Teeth
cool
was one
poster.
too, where I was kind of like, "What's this about?" But yeah, I'll have to check it out. What's Deathgasm about?
So basically there's this boy, he relocates and moves in with his cousin, and well, his not just only his cousin but with his family, and he has a cousin who's just like a complete douchebag, and they try to make it seem like they're like, I think that yeah, the family's like really religious and stuff like that, but he's really into like rock and like punk rock and stuff like that. So then he's living in this town and he can't find anyone that's like him, so he's hanging out with this boy who's kind of like he is like a nerd, and but then he meets this guy who's kind of similar to him, where they're both into like rock, and so they start a band, and they somehow summon like this ancient evil, and it's just like it's mixed with like black magic. There's really some awesome music in it, and there is a weapon. I won't give you a spoiler, but there's a weapon that I've you wouldn't. It's not a weapon. People use it for other things.
Okay.
But
Okay. I think I'm getting it.
yeah, the way that they use it is just hilarious. Like there's so many funny parts in it. But
Like, does this weapon vibrate at all?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I got
And they
it. I
just
think I got it.
it's so
That's the
unexpected.
kind of humor I like, though. Like, I think those are the like, I love it. I crack up at it. I guess it's like toilet humor sort of thing,
Right.
but done in a right context, you'll have me rolling on the floor laughing. Like,
Right. But yeah, it's great. Like it's just wonderful. It's
I know
actually
the one I liked was Happy Death Day or Death. You know, it's the one where she keeps like it's like sort of like Groundhog Day, but like a horror movie. And
a fun one.
yeah, I thought it was a really fun one, especially because I think that night I just wasn't really in the mood to watch it. You know, my roommate wanted to watch it. I was kind of like, all right, we'll give it a go. Even though I love horror, there's just times where I was like, I'm just in a cranky mood. And it took me right out of my cranky mood. I was absorbed in it. I'm like, oh, this is actually good. Because I think I was like, oh, if this isn't good, I'm just gonna not be happy. And it was, and it was funny. And yeah, it took you on that ride, you know, and it takes you out of those sort of cranky moods when you're in that sort of zone. But
But one more thing, even with Deathgasm. Well, I think I probably said that it was an Australian movie, but it's from New Zealand. So I don't want someone what she's lying, you know.
oh,
So
right,
into
right.
it. But it's point is, I kind of went. I don't know if this ever happens to you when you watch a movie. Sometimes you kind of just want something on in the background, and
Yes.
or before you go to sleep, but then it keeps you up, or it just is able to catch your attention. That's pretty much what happened with me with Deathgasm, and it just kind of it's full of there's a lot of gore in it too. So if you are a fan of that, obviously it's gonna come together. So that one's more recent, and there is another one called like Housebound, and I think that that one still might be on Netflix, and it's recent. So because I know like a lot of the comedy horrors I really dig, they're older, like from the 80s and 90s. So those are just more
Which is
recent
why it's
things.
nice though when you can find some new ones, you know, like Deathgasm. Well, then I also did kind of want to talk about because you know it is Charles Bush is a female impersonator. There's definitely some and some LGBT moments in the film. Like I really like the moment where Berdine and I always forget about it and then it catches me off guard, but Berdine and Chicklet have kind of like they were best friends, but then Chicklet's hanging out with this surfer gang, and then but her and Berdine have sort of reconnected, and they're sitting in the room, and all of a sudden, like Berdine's like, "I just really missed you, like how we used to be," and like leans forward as if she's going to kiss her, as if they've been doing this for a while, and then like they get interrupted, it pulls back. But I really enjoy those little moments because there's nothing like yeah, the characters of Provolone and Yo-Yo are keeping it a secret. They've got to be guys, but it's almost because it's not that they're ashamed of their homosexuality. It's almost like they want to still, like Chicklet's having troubles fitting in, and it's almost like they just want to make sure that they're still the guys. But it's really accepting. It's really like celebrating it, and it's not so in your face. But like even Bettina Barnes, when she finds the two guys sort of dressing up in her room with like her peignoir, all of her like lingerie and everything, and she's like, "Oh, that color is great with your tan, but with yours, that's just not your color." And you haven't even tried my shoes because they take off laughing or take off running. And I just think it does a really good job at trying to because again, Psycho Beach Party, it's not just about the horror and it's not just about the comedy. It's also about taking a genre, a section of films that were made at a time where they had to be very square, very straight laced, and
Right.
instead it's like we're gonna take this movie, this genre, and we're gonna if the it's Charles Bush is like, well, let's make this movie as if it was today, which would have been 2000 at the time, and he sort of did because Matt Keesler's in it, and he was sort of a staple of independent films at the time. And it really does have that for being filmed in 21 days. It is a top-notch film, and it does have that independent spirit, though, of like low budget quality, which are some of my favorite horror movies anyway. I mean, we all celebrate Halloween, but I could think of a lot of movies that were made for such a low budget that have such a lasting impact. And Psycho Beach Party for me definitely is one of those that have this last like I said, I come back to it once a year. It's nostalgic for me and for people that grew up watching those movies, I think it must be really nostalgic. But oh, I did want to mention another though movie that people should watch that I would like to do a review on at some point is Ticked Off Trannies with Knives. I mean, just the title alone, I was like, okay, I'm definitely watching this. And it's sort of like a Kill Bill esque movie where like this girl gets attacked. Well, this drag queen gets attacked, and she and her drag queen friends decide to toughen up and like take on this revenge thing. But the whole thing, even though it's a revenge story, and they definitely don't shy away from the gore elements, it's got that sort of low budget comedy element too. I mean, when I'm watching that movie, I'm laughing just as much as I'm like shocked and horrified. But I definitely think like the gay and lesbian community and horror, it seems to be one of the genres that celebrates it more than some of the others. I feel like there's a lot of times where it's almost like these characters are martyred. Like another one I always think of is one of the Chucky movies. I can't remember which one. I think it's Curse of Chucky or Bride of Chucky, but like one of the characters is gay in it, and it's almost like it's a yeah, that's just how it is, like there's no like, whereas most movies like dramas are, it's these characters become the martyr, or they have to die, or they're lovelorn, and in these movies it's almost kind of like it's just part of the tapestry, and there's a killer coming, so who cares, like let's just run. And I think Psycho Beach Party also just celebrates that in a really positive way. Yeah, was there anything else you had really to say about the movie?
Just that if you are someone who enjoy comedy, horrors, mysteries, romance, or you just want to spice up your movie life and you have not checked out this movie, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's got plenty of laughs. There's definitely gore, silly gore, as well as, I think the whole finale at the end, without giving away any spoilers, comes together in a way that it incorporates all the funnier moments from the rest of the film to like an actual sort of slasher ending, where you've got the chase sequence, you've got the thrills, the chills. And then, it ends on a very much like they said they very intentionally wanted to do this sort of slasher ending where you have the surprise ending, and I think it works. And I love that how it ends exactly how you said you love that it began with the sort of bouncer chick go-go dancer, the go-go
Right.
dancer sort of, and it really does have this energy that leaves you feeling good in the end. And isn't that what we want out of any film that we watch, whether it's comedy, drama, horror? We want to feel some sort of lift in the end, even if it's sad or this or that. We want to feel that sort of joy. Well, thanks everybody for watching another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What are some of your favorite horror comedies? Do you like campy movies? And have you ever seen Psycho Beach Party, and is it one of your favorite films? This is your host, Justin Steele. You can find me over at Wicked Horror, or on 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. And with me is my very special guest, the real queen of horror, Zena Dixon. You can also find her on Wicked Horror, Dread Central, or at realqueenofhorror.com. Thanks again, Zena, for coming over to talk about horror movies with me. I love it. I love that you are my horror movie soulmate, and that we have such, and I'm glad that this time I got to hear a few different movies that I haven't seen, and I think you've heard a few that you haven't seen, and I look forward to the next time we get together to do this, hopefully soon.
Thank you so much. I always just have such a good time talking horror with you.
Me too. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you soon.